Why are you varnishing that one again?
Because it had white flecks of paint on it because it's been under the bench.
Or do you just flamboyantly flick paint around, do you, when
I
you're
do,
painting?
yes. Yes, I do that all the time. I've done that for many, many years.
Hi everybody, and welcome to another video. This is the painting I've been working on this week, and I'm going to just do a little bit of a lesson on this foreground that we can see here. It's quite effective, the technique that I use. I'm going to have a look at that now. We're just going to zip through getting this bit done, and then I'll show you how we do that. So, if you want more detailed instruction on how to paint scenes very much like this, head over to michaeljamessmith.tv, and there's loads of lessons there, more being added all the time. Anyway, let's get working on this, shall we? Let's go for it. Right, so now we're moving into the foreground. We're going to do all these long grasses and flowers. Before we start working on any of those details, we need to bring the levels down a little bit. There are some areas that need to be a little bit darker, so I'm going to do that simply by using Series 4. This is the size 2. And I'm just going to give it a general sort of darker tone with some sap green. Just sort of dragging down on the brush. So rather than going sideways like this, I'm turning the brush on its axis and getting in some of these darker tones. And that is going to allow us to maintain some of those details that we need to have in the darker shadows. Rather than it being a flat colour, this definitely gives us the feeling more of grass. So this hasn't been thinned down at all. This is paint as it's come straight from the tube, just mixed in some sap green and a small amount of burnt umber. And any areas that are darker than that, we just go over again.
Okay, so now I think what we need, now I've darkened that, is in order to get this to have the strength and vibrancy, I think it's important that the majority of that paint is, or the highlights are put down thicker. And one of the ways we can do that is with the handmade brush, or the homemade brush, which has basically been made from another brush. I'll link the video on how to make that up here for you. But what I do is add very thick paint to this brush, and it's very thin. It's only actually got 1 or 2 hairs, very long, and that allows us to pick up the paint and get a nice lot of paint on the brush. And then when we run it across like this, it puts down a thin line but with a lot of paint. So once this is dry, it's going to be rough. This paint has a slight impasto to it. So one of the other things you can do, which you might have seen me do before, is you can actually put your paint on a palette knife, and that allows you to pick up a nice bit of thick paint, keeping it close to your panel. You can get that done much quicker then, because you're not having to reach across to your palette to try and put paint on the brush. So yes, we have a lot of grass within there, and there's still some grass in these darker shades here, but they also have other little leaves of plants and things like that. We have flowers and all sorts of things. So what I'd like to do now, before we continue building up on that grass, is just put in a few other textures. So if we work from the top here, I'm going to really warm some of that area up, and I'm going to do that by going to the fan brush. So I'm going to the Series 4 size 1. So what we have, and we might need to adjust this slightly, we have areas all the way through where we have different coloured flowers and almost dry summery plants and things. So I'm just going to use the corner of the brush just to give us a slightly different texture in that top left corner here. So before I now move on to putting in some flowers, I'm just going to put in a few darker areas. You still get some of the darker areas, especially coming over the area of beach here. So we have more of a brown colour. And it's not too dark, I have to say, but we have that sort of thing going on. So we have some darker grasses. So just using the rigger brush for this, and what that does is it gives us a nice tight line. See, one of the benefits to using the homemade brush is it gives you thick paint, but it gives you a bit of a broken line, which is fine when you've got that density there, but when you're looking to do these areas outside of that, where you do need a little bit more, I don't know, the brush marks I suppose needs to be a bit more precise, then there's no other tool that is better than the rigger brush.